Joining us now, former senior policy advisor at the U.S. Mission for the UN and co-founder of ARCO, Jonathan Wachtel, plus former Middle East editor at the Associated Press, Dan Perry. We appreciate you both being here. Jonathan, I'm going to start with you here. Just your reaction to Hamas saying that getting a Palestinian state recognized by so many countries, including the UK, that's the fruits of October 7th. Kind of seems like they're claiming victory for what they did.
Well, they have reason to claim victory. They're getting essentially the aspiration that they wanted, recognition of a Palestinian state. Now, they haven't achieved what they really want, which is the destruction of their neighbor, Israel. But certainly they have taken a major step as a result of this war.
Dan, I want to get your thoughts on this. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was in Israel last week. Here's what he said could happen if a Palestinian state was recognized by U.S. allies.
We've warned of two things. One, it actually makes it harder to negotiate when those negotiations were occurring, and because it emboldens these groups. And the second is we've warned them that there will be an Israeli counter-reaction to those moves.
Dan, not only would it, I presume it would embolden Hamas, but also gives them some sense of legitimacy. Also makes them feel that, as they said, their horrible attack on Israel on October 7th was worth it in their mind. What happens next?
Well, even worse than whatever Hamas feels and whatever spin they choose to put on this is the impression that is created among the Palestinian body politic and in the region. If the region and the Palestinians should actually credit Hamas with this, that would have devastating consequences, because even those people that want there to be a partition in the Holy Land and for there to be two states, one Jewish and one Palestinian, even such people understand that the precondition for this is for Hamas to no longer be a player and a factor, certainly not to be a governing entity and an armed entity. And therefore, if the recognition of Palestine right now, which in my view is premature, leads to Hamas being strengthened, that very paradoxically makes more distant the prospect of a Palestinian state. And in that sense, these well-meaning allies of Israel, who I do believe intend to be friends of Israel and are trying to do the right thing, Canada, France, Australia, the UK, may have made Palestine more distant, not brought it more close.
So obviously, Jonathan, President Trump's going to address this tomorrow at the UN here. What are you expecting him to say?
Look, he's going to point out October 7th, which is just around the corner, and the anniversary of that, and the horrendous thing that happened on that day that set this all in this horrible spin that we're in and spiral down. He's going to complain about, premature recognition is my expectation. This is not playing out the way he would like to see it play out, which is you cannot have a terrorist organization running a government. It just doesn't work.
People of the Gaza Strip voted them in.
They voted them in,
didn't,
yes, but
actually.
That's even somewhat dubious, if you look at that, the way it
Maybe a coup
happened.
then as well on top of it, but there was an avenue, kind of.
Look, there was a violent takeover. Look, the basic fact is the people who live in Gaza are not having a love affair with the Israelis, especially what they've had to endure over the last couple of years. They can't stand Israel. So having some sort of powerful voice and someone that might be representing them militarily in terms of aspirations of having their own statehood and vanquishing their enemies, sure. There's going to be popularity within the Gaza Strip for Hamas, absolutely. But the basic fact is they're not going to see the future that they deserve as a people wanting to have their own freedom to breathe and to create some sort of sense of themselves and to lift themselves up economically unless they recognize that Israel's there as their neighbor and have a responsible government come in that will truly represent them. One of the problems also is that President Abbas, Mahmoud Abbas, who represents the PLO, Fatah, that end of things, which is an adversarial group when it comes to the competition with Hamas, they haven't had free and fair elections in the West Bank in almost 2 decades. So there's really no real government to represent the Palestinian people in a way that is responsible.
Right. Again, as you both pointed out,
I need to
a premature recognition. Dan, we are really out of time. I can give you 10 seconds.
Look, the Palestinians never did elect Hamas, and Hamas does not want a two-state solution. And basically, Hamas wants to fight Israel, and if Hamas is not pushed aside, as they should be, then there will be no two-state solution. What needs to happen now is for the world to condition reconstruction of Gaza on Hamas disarming. And I have to point out, the PA has called for this, the Arab League has called for this, the European Union called for this, and the U.S. calls for this. Hamas right now must be pressured to disarm, independent of who recognizes Palestine or who does not. The end game to Gaza goes through massive pressure on Hamas to disarm.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Dan, Jonathan, thank you.
Pleasure.